Hello, and welcome to Bullish Video Games. As the title suggests, this is no longer a blind playthrough, this is now a walkthrough, because for this case onward, I had to consult the Steam discussion pages a lot. For this case in particular, I really wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. I had an idea, like a conceptual idea, but overall, as far as the query goes, I just had no idea on how to tackle it. So because of that, this is not going to be a blind playthrough anymore. But with that, let's get started here and see what the case is.
Whew, thanks, Detective. I just told my kid what happened and he stopped crying. Finally, some peace and quiet. What's with kids these days anyways? Always playing games, always on their phones. Even when we make it illegal, they're still doing it. Oh, that brings us to our next case. Some college kid was caught disturbing the public with their cellular device during class time. Thankfully, this miscreant was reported by a responsible, law-abiding citizen who sent us their text message conversations with the suspect. Zora knows we could use more law-abiding citizens like that in our country. Not like these dog-nabbed phone texters. Why don't they watch TV like the rest of us?
So this case is us trying to figure out who someone is through text messages. And that's what we are given. We're just going to take this text message by text message. You have the person who reported them, which is me, and then the suspect, which is Weirdo Classmate. So Weirdo Classmate, hey, we're taking 2 of the same classes this semester, haha, me. Crazy, well, I'm going to be busy, Weirdo Classmate. Whoa, okay then. A couple days later, Weirdo Classmate. Hey, did they change the page to view classes? Me. Not that I know of, it's still lzu.edu. So this is the first site we're going to look at. You have the classes, teacher login, which we'll get to in a second, and then the About Us page. Some little history here, and even an Apply For Now button, which you can do. And this doesn't really matter. I mean, you can just mash the keys if you want. Hit Accept All. Which terms and conditions say, by submitting an application to LZU, I pledge to forfeit the entirety of my assets and my family's assets to LZU and the nation of Calazurania without guarantee of acceptance. I also acknowledge that Zoran is a really cool person who I would like to hang out with. And you just hit Submit. There we go. You get an achievement for that. But back to the case. So that's the first step, is just getting to the website. Second text page. Weirdo Classmate. Hey, what did you draw for the project? Me. WTF, why are you asking? Weirdo Classmate. Just looking for inspiration. Me. KYS. Weirdo Classmate. Thanks for the advice. A couple days later. Weirdo Classmate. YWA is on the main page. The whole point of this text page is trying to figure out these acronyms, which do not mean what we understand them to mean. In this universe, they mean something else. So to figure that out, we need to get into this teacher login, but we don't know a password. So if we forgot the password, it says, please speak with our computer security expert, Professor Alan Douglas. Go to view classes. There's a computer literacy class. You check out the professor. Sure enough, Professor Alan Douglas. And much like the last case with the New Hampshire wiki, the same thing here is reading through all this, trying to figure out which classes the 2 students are taking together. And yes, this is all readable. They all have a main page, a page about the professor, syllabus, homework, and readings. But again, I'm just going to hit the highlights. I'm not going to read through all of this because it is quite a lot. Anyway, back to figuring out the login. So you go to the computer literacy class, and just to confirm, yes, this is Professor Alan Douglas. You go to the readings, and about halfway down, he says there are 2 halves to a good password. The first half should be a memorable word in lowercase that only you should know about. This can be anything from your mother's maiden name to the name of the elementary school you went to. If you want a password as strong as mine, however, you should use the name of the street that you were raised on. So that's the first half of his password. For the latter half of your password, you should follow the same advice, but use a number instead. However, try not to use a number larger than 100, as that might make it too hard to remember. For example, I used the last 2 digits of the year that I first started working here at LZU. So his password is going to be the street he grew up on and the year where he started working at LZU. So if you read his page here, it says, a native Los Angeles, I can never say this word, Los Zorangelan, Alan Douglas was born and raised less than 400 feet away from Los Angeles University is now. And there's a picture here where it says, walking through the arch on the way to my first day of work. And if you look at the picture, he's wearing a hat with LZU and this little, I think it's a torch, it's kind of hard to see, next to the letters. So those are the clues given. You have the arch here, which is unfinished, and you have his hat, which says LZU with a little torch symbol next to it. So to figure this out, you want to go to the history tab, where this professor is a little crotchety old guy who even has his own website where he says trains are bad, and that's about it. But you go to the readings on the history page here, and it has this arch where it says completed January 1st, 1994. So that's one half. And then if you go to the About Us page, the history of our logo, that little torch next to LZU was used from 1993 to 1996. So the possible numbers then for his password are 93 to 96, but because we see here the arch wasn't completed until 94, we know that the year he started going there was 93. So that's the second half of his password. The first half, conveniently next to the arch picture, is a little map of LZU and the streets surrounding it. So we know from looking at his page, he said he was born less than 400 feet away from LZU. I guess you could just maybe like use your finger or something on your desk or just kind of eyeball it here. But you have the scale here of 200 feet. So double that, it's nearly this entire height of the picture. But LZU is at the bottom here. You have where the arch is located. And so 400 feet, if he's passing through the arch, he likely lives on either Cortlandt Street or Cricket Road. So then that's going to be the first half of his password. And I'm just going to tell you right now, the correct answer is Cortlandt. And then he went to it in 93. And that gets us into the teacher's lounge. So if you go to the discussion, there's some chats here with the professors. And then scroll down a bit, you can see the history professor asks, these young kids keep using LOL. Any adults here have any tarnation what this means? Professor Douglas says it means being lazy. You can learn what a lot of these acronyms mean on youthtranslator.com. So then if we go back to the text messages, what these two are actually saying is, weirdo classmate, hey, what did you draw for the project? Me. WTF, white tree frog. A friendly species of frog that is commonly kept as a pet, also known as a dumpy tree frog. Weirdo classmate, just looking for inspiration. Me, KYS, so he's telling him to draw a Kentucky yellow-spotted salamander. And then at the bottom here, WYA, wow, your art. That is an expression of awe at a piece of artwork. Wow, your art is on the main page. So basically, what they're saying to each other is that the person who submitted these messages drew the white tree frog, and then the weirdo classmate is saying, wow, it's on the main page. What main page? Well, if they're talking about drawing, they're most likely talking about the art class. Because sure enough, on the main page here, you have featured student paintings this semester. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that this is the White's Tree Frog, and it was painted by Matthew Hoji. So we at least have the student who submitted the text messages, as well as one class they shared together. So then, before you exit the teacher's lounge here, you go to important data, and here we can download all of the student names, as well as their IDs. So we're going to use this then to find the student. But before we do that, I'm just going to get Matthew Hoji's ID here. So now we have a student ID, and we will set that aside. Alright, so we're done with the teacher's lounge. We go to the third text page. It says, weirdo classmate, did you get ACB for the homework? Me, yeah, I got that too. Weirdo classmate, cool, the person who sits next to me in my row says so too. She got a better test score than both of us combined. Me, that doesn't sound too hard to do, especially with your score. Weirdo classmate, hey, I've been to less than half of the classes, give me a break. Just a pro life tip, yeah, if you're not attending class and you get a bad grade, that's your own fucking fault. We know from the text messages that there is homework involved. So if you go to each of these pages and check out the homework, you'll see that only certain classes have available homework, which are economics, philosophy, and science. So economics, philosophy, and science are the only 3 classes that have posted homework. So now we need to go through each of these and make sure that we are getting the correct answers, and then we'll know which class they took together. So we'll start with economics. First question says, why is the economy of Los Angeles considered a market economy? Here, if you go to the readings, it says here in the second paragraph, although the predominant economic force in Los Angeles is driven by ZOCs, which are Zoran-owned companies, the Los Angeles economy is still considered a market economy. This is because ZOCs are not state-owned but privately owned. The Los Angeles market is thus bound by market forces with very little state intervention. So if we go to the homework, check out the answers here. Los Angeles has a flourishing private sector with little state intervention. So for economics, question 1, answer is A. And you can do some process of elimination here too, like if you see that one of these answers does not match up with what they said for whatever you get, then by process of elimination you know that it is not this class. But I'm going to go through all of them just to show you what it is anyway. So that's question 1. Question 2, take a look at the actual exports of Los Angeles measured in millions of dollars, which you can download here. Use this data for the next few questions. Question 2, on average, exports from non-ZOCs make up how much of Los Angeles' total exports each year? So we need non-ZOCs yearly exports and then the total exports for every year. So to get the total exports, this is just going to be a simple group by, where we want the sum of the export worth. And I'm just going to call this export totals. So then there we go, every year, total export value. And then here, we want non-ZOCs. So what are non-ZOCs? Well, go to the readings. You have ZOCs, which are benevolent monopolies over energy sectors, as well as media and industrial materials. And then it says outside of ZOCs, so non-ZOCs, Los Angeles also exports food, services, and artistic crafts. So if you want to help narrow this down, you can do a simple group by the category here, because at least they separate it out by category. And then you just have a nice little reference there for when you organize this. So this is going to be another group by where we are parsing out craft, food, and service, because these are non-ZOCs, and then we're just grouping them by year, getting the sum of the export worth, which I've just relabeled total. So I'm going to then call this non-ZOC yearly. So then now we have the non-ZOC's yearly export totals. So then all this is just a simple math. So we want the average of the percentage of non-ZOCs from the total exports. So then you have the average of the non-ZOCs of total exports, and they're just joined together based on year. And then if you look here, I completely forgot about division precision, which is talked about way early on in the cases. And so if you query this without the 1.0, it will give you a 0. Submit that, then you have about 10%. And if you want to also then just make it, I guess, prettier, you can also then multiply this average by 100, and then that'll give you the whole number 10. So then for econ homework question 2, answer C, 10%. And then you see here, C was the question they got for number 2, so econ could still possibly be one of the classes. And then last class here, between what years did exports by ZOCs experience the largest decrease in the worth of goods exported? So now we need the ZOC yearly export total. So here I just went through my history, and we're just going to change this categories from the non-ZOCs to the ZOCs, which are energy, industry, and media. And there we go, now we have the ZOC yearly export totals. So between what year did exports by ZOCs experience the largest decrease in the worth of goods exported? Luckily here, we just have 4 possible answers we need to look at. So 96 to 97, only decreased about 700. 95 to 96, decreased by 1,000. C, 94 to 95, decreased by about 5,000. And then 92 to 93, decreased about 1,000. So 94 to 95 is going to be the answer for 3. So it is not going to be econ because the answers for econ are A, C, C. But that takes care of econ. So now we're going to try philosophy. And this was the one that really threw me for a loop because this uses all the information for the chapter 8, which is the final chapter of the manual. So this is where you really need it, and that's why I didn't get into it at first. Chapter 8, self-joins and self-joins. Here we go. If you enjoyed reading this book, you should take your time and save this chapter as it is the last. If you hated reading this book, which is much more likely, you should also take your time reading this chapter as you savor the feeling that you won't have to read any more of this drivel nonsense. Self-joins. You can join a table with any other table, including itself. This is useful when you want to find the relationship between rows within the same table. For example, take a look at the query to the left. This query finds all pairs of people where one person is exactly twice the age of the other. Since all the data we need for this is within one table, we can accomplish this with a self-join. When we join two different tables together, we always join on the columns that share common values across tables, such as ID columns. When we join a table with itself, however, our join condition should define the difference between rows that we're trying to find. In the query above, the difference we're trying to find are people that are exactly twice as old as another person. This here, when I first read this, I conceptually understood what it was trying to do. However, if you're like me, I'm a much more visual thinker, and so I wasn't then able to figure out the query itself. This is another example where I wish the developer had put in just some more examples or maybe separate this out into an earlier chapter, and that way we could practice it some more, because this is a little hard to get off the rip, especially as the difficulty has increased exponentially. This really feels like it comes out of left field when we barely are nailing down the previous chapters. But anyway, that's just me. When we join a table with itself, we're joining a table with another copy of itself. Table P1 is the copy of the table that will contain people with half the age of those in P2. Take a look at the tables on the left which illustrate what this self-join process looks like. So here we have table P1, table P2, and all that's basically saying is that because all this information exists within the same table, you are just copying and then overlapping that information to itself. So in the normal way where you would join tables that have a similar column, you are essentially just telling the table, hey, since you have the same information, I am just going to manipulate that information you have within yourself. And if that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, that's fine. It's a little easier to get once you actually see it. Moving on. Null. You might see a row with a column value that looks empty. Don't worry, you're not going crazy. That value is null. This means that this column value doesn't exist. For example, the example table contains my reasons to live. I don't have any, so this value is null. You can check if a column value is null by using the is or is not operators. So then in the examples, you have reasons to live is null, where reasons to live is not null. And when it says null, it literally means that there is an empty space where a value should be. And other than the last case with the New Hampshire wiki, I have yet to see space that is null. So this is another example where I'm not sure why this information is in this chapter exactly, because it doesn't seem to fit. Sort of like how in the division precision here, which this was used in this chapter, but it's all the way back here in chapter 5. So it's very easy to forget. So just reading over this again, basically the reason this needs division precision is because that's just how SQL is. Because we needed it in the last one, we weren't going to get a nice whole number, we were going to get decimal places. So hence why we needed to multiply the variables by 1.0 instead of just trying to divide it as was. Anyway, back to chapter 8. Except. Sometimes it's easier to look for the opposite of what you're trying to find. Let's say we have two tables with the same columns as the people table named suspects and citizens, where each suspect is a citizen. Let's also say that we're trying to find all citizens that are not suspects. In this case, finding the opposite, finding all the citizens that are suspects, is easy. We can simply select all values from the suspects table. With the except keyword, we can use the results from this query to help us find what we actually want. The except keyword allows us to subtract the results of one query from another. Place this keyword between two queries to remove the results of the bottom query from the results of the top query. In other words, it's the top query minus the bottom query. However, in order for a row to be removed using the except keyword, the entire row needs to exist in the results for both queries. So this was another concept where I understood it mentally, but then there's only one example here where it says, select name from the citizens table, except select name from suspect. So it says this query results in all citizens that are not suspects. So conceptually, I get what it's trying to do, but I really wish he would have added the generated table result so we could actually see what it looks like. Moving on. This means that it's important to be very intentional about what you select, as this could change the final result of your query. This is to say that when using the except statement, you probably don't want to be selecting all columns. So this is essentially saying that when you query and you have the intention to use except, that you want to be more specific for what you are selecting, because if you just use the asterisk wildcard, it's going to essentially get confused, because if you try to pull from everything, if the selects don't match up, then it doesn't exactly understand what it is you're trying to get rid of. At least I think. Congratulations! What do you feel now that you're at the end? Is it a feeling of joy now that it's all over? Or perhaps that of emptiness now that there's nothing left to read? To quote from our great leader Zoran, don't smile because it's over, cry because it happened. In his brilliance, our great leader Zoran summed up what it feels like to finally learn SQL. Then you have the guy from the cover that says, I still don't understand anything. Yeah, I feel the same way. But anyway, so we go back to the philosophy, go to homework, start with the question 1. According to Zoroastrianism, why do we know we are experiencing the true form of Zoran? This is another flavor text question, where if you go through the readings, about halfway down it says, Zoran inspires universal emotion. True forms, objects perceived without distortions of space and time. However, this is really stupid since there is one clear example of a person whose true form can be experienced, which is Zoran. Go back to the homework. So A, Zoran universally inspires positive emotion which exists beyond space and time. Question 2, Zoran has been very influential. For these next few questions, download this table that shows just how influential Zoroastrianism has been. So, question 2, how many philosophers only have Zoran as a direct influence? This is where we're going to use except. So here we are selecting those who are directly influenced from the philosophy homework, where the philosopher was Zoran. If you scroll down, you can see it here. However, we want to subtract out those who were directly influenced by people who were not Zoran. I forgot to say this was also from the philosophy homework. So then you can either count this up manually, save it, do a count, or I got a lot better, well, I won't say a lot better, but I got better at trying to figure out subqueries, again, thanks to the theme discussion pages. So to do a subquery, essentially, we know that we want to count how many philosophers because we understand that this is just going to generate a list of names, not give us the number. So if we do a subquery where we are selecting the count of those directly influenced from, and then your from is essentially going to be the answer that your first table generated. So then when you do from, you can just put this in parentheses. And here we get the answer as 13. So for question 2, it's going to be C. And then 3, not counting duplicates, how many philosophers have been directly influenced by someone who was also directly influenced by Zoran? So I'm going to show you how I separated it first, because this is an example where we can do the self-join. So here we have people who were directly influenced by Zoran. So that's the first step. And then here, in order to create the second table, these people from the first table, which Z for Zoran students, are then going to become the new philosophers. So in order to represent that, we need those who are directly influenced to become the new philosophers of our new table. And I forgot to stipulate that we are selecting for the new table here. So then these are all the people who are then directly influenced by those who are directly influenced by Zoran. And then, because it's saying to be careful of duplicates, we want a distinct list, and then we are going to count that list, and that gives us a count of 33. So that's how you do it if you separate it. Now I'm going to do my best to explain how to do a self-join in this. So what I've set up here is essentially the same information I just told you, but in a more succinct scripted way. So we have here, we are joining the philosophy homework to itself, and we are telling it that the directly influenced from the first philosophy table is going to equal the philosopher column from the second philosophy table. So again, The self-join is essentially taking a table, copying it, and then overlaying the information that you want. However, you need to be very specific in what it is that you want to generate. So for example, when you are stipulating the columns, you need to tell it that you want the directly influenced from the second table, because I can't like make another table here, but if you imagine this is copied over, we're taking this and just overlapping it here. So then that would be the first table, this would be the second table, and then we want the information from the second table. But we also want to stipulate that the philosopher from the first table must equal Zoran, and then that will help it narrow it down. Hit submit, and it gives us the same information. So then here it's going to be A, C, B. So then philosophy is the second class they share. But before we go on with the case, I'm just going to go over science here just to show you how it's done. So now we have the science homework. Question 1. What are the odds that someone is cool and someone who is not cool with the cool gene, capital C, lowercase c, have a child that is cool? If we go to the readings, go down to the bottom. This essentially teaches us, what was that guy's name? I'm sure I'll put it up here when I edit. I want it to, it's Mendelev's or Mendel, some kind of monk who grew a bunch of peas or whatever. Oh yeah, it's here. I'll type here, Mendelian inheritance, where then you have the recessive and dominant trait composed of alleles. So if we're looking at someone who is cool, which is both lowercase c's, with someone who is not cool, and specifically they want the capital C, lowercase c. So if you just kind of draw that out, find out the person who is cool. Person who is cool according to this will both have lowercase c's, but the answer for this is going to be 50%. So at least for my iteration for what the clues are, you can tell that science is not going to be a class because the answer here is B, which is not the answer that they got. But anyway, moving on. Coolness is measured by the number of SQL queries someone has written. Download my studies here. Use this for the next few questions. Question 2. It is proven that cool people write more than 500 queries before reaching 21 years of age. With this in mind, how many cool people were included in the study above? So if we look here, you have a bunch of names, their ages, and the queries written. Lucky for us, the ages stop before 21. So this is just going to be a simple group by where we are selecting for the subject's name, and we are summing up all of the queries they've written, which I've relabeled coolness, grouped by, and then if you remember having, we want that coolness to be greater than 500. So then now here we have the list of everyone whose coolness level is over 500. But they also want the count. So then here, counted to 15. Answer for this would be B. And I just use another subquery here. Select a count for coolness, or you could do subject name or whatever if you just left it as queries written. And then I put the from, which is the table we just got, in parentheses. So once you figure out how to do subqueries, it is pretty useful, but if not though, then you just have to do a couple extra tables. Alright, then based on the study above, between which ages on average does the number of queries someone writes increase the most? So then for this one, this is just another simple group by, where we are selecting for the age, we are summing up the queries. And you don't have to do this, but you can also narrow it down by age, because if you look at the answers, they only want ages from 11 to 20. That's the age range that we are presented with. So that helps just narrow down the table so we don't have 10 other ages to look at. But we go from 15 to 16, increases about 90, 11 to 12, increases about 118, 19 to 20, 100 exactly, so it's not that. And then 13 to 14, not even 100. So 11 to 12 then would be B for question 3 in science. So that is all the answers. But as discovered earlier, we know that they also share the philosophy class together. Go to syllabus. Seating assignments can be viewed here, attendance sheet, and midterm scores. Going back to the clues, it says, cool, the person who sits next to me in my row says so too. She got a better test score than both of us combined. So if we check out the test scores, it just gives us the ID and the scores. So we'll grab Matthew Hody's student ID. And here we're just separating out his score, which is 76. So if the person who sits next to the suspect got a higher score than the suspect and Hoji combined, then that means, if we look at a score, that this plus the suspect has to be less than the person who sat next to the suspect. So if you look at all the scores, and you can either do this visually, or you can do an order by. In fact, I'll just do an order by real quick. You can see that the lowest score anyone gets is a 10. So then that means that 10 plus 76 is 86, so the highest score someone would have to get is 87. And you can do greater than 86, because again, if you just do the greater than less than, it doesn't include the number. You can do greater than or equals to 87, etc. A couple ways to do this. But I've just relabeled this high score. And now we have a list of people here who could have scored higher than both Hoji and the suspect combined. And so then because of that, the highest score anyone got is also 100. So that means the highest score the suspect could have gotten, 76 plus 24 is 100, so then 23. So then here, I've just relabeled a low score. 23 or below are the possible scores for the suspect. Go back to the text page. It says, I've been to less than half of the classes. We go to attendance here, and it visually looks a little strange when you just look at it, but it's sorting it by date, and then it just has every student ID for that date. And this is one where I very much was confused at how to tackle this and had to consult the Steam discussion pages again. But in order to do this, we need to know how many days there were to begin with. So, I guess you could try to scroll through and manually check, but an easier way to do it is to count the distinct attend dates from the table, which gives us 25. So half of 25, 12 and a half. So now to figure this out, we are selecting for student IDs, and we are counting the attend dates, and I've just relabeled that days. We are grouping by student ID, and we are stipulating that the days they attended is less than 12.5. There we go, 50 tables. So now we have a list of students who only attended for half of the days of the philosophy class. And so here we are just joining them together, where you have the people who were absent a lot, and then people who had the low scores. So then this is a list of students who are much more likely to be our suspects. So now we just have to figure out where they sit alongside those with the high scores. So here we have the seats. They are separated out by row, seat number. So like I did for the philosophy homework, I'm just going to separate this out table by table before I show you how to do the self-join. So for here, we're just looking for the high score seats, which I've just relabeled HS seats. And then essentially just do the same thing for the slackers, just change a couple of words around. So then when I first did this, I visually just cross-checked to see who would be sitting next to each other. So for the slackers, 12, 26, nope. B, 5, 12, 24, nope. C, we have 36, nope. D, we have 19 and 30. And here we have 18. So 18 has the 95, 19 has the 12. So 95 minus 12, 83, which is higher than Matthew Hoju's score. So this is someone who is the potential suspect. Just copy that for now. But then just to make sure there's nothing extra. G20, no. 32, no. G48, nope. H3731, nope. I1133, nope. And J33 as well. Nope. So then go back to our student ID list. And we have our suspect. Now, before we go and arrest, I am then going to show you how to do the self-join, which, again, I'm still not as clear on, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Alright, well, while trying to do this, I think I may have broke the game, because it nearly froze, and now it is saying that the table name already exists, even though I don't have it saved as anything. But anyway, so if I'm not mistaken, this is essentially what you would try to do, where you're looking for the student ID, the row, the seat number. I mean, these don't really matter, but you were trying to find one seat above or one seat below, right? I guess next to in this case, where you know they share the same row, but you just won one seat next to, and then you're also joining it with the high scores and the slackers. So I don't know if this is a bug I encountered, but for some reason when I tried to join all three of these together as is, it won't let me, and it did before, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But anyway, luckily for us, there's many ways to figure out who the suspect is. And just to show you the last clue here, this is where Asdef. Me, wait, did you send that when we were in class? You know that's illegal. And we had a classmate saying, huh? Oh no, wait, so sorry, accident. Please don't report me, I'll do anything, please. Blah, blah, blah. So then if I did this right, you are commanded to arrest Chang Brady under the accusation of texting during class time on LZU campus violating blah, 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 which prohibits disturbing the peace with a mobile device. So let's see if I showed you this right. Thank God. As you can see, these episodes are getting longer and longer, and I'm having to explain way more, and I couldn't even show you how to do that self-join at the end. I probably did something wrong, but I'm not sure. I was able to do it like in my personal playthroughs, but for whatever reason, of course, when I'm trying to record this, it doesn't work. But again, use the Steam discussion pages. They're very, very helpful if you are stuck. Hope you had a good time watching that. Stay tuned. I'm still trying to figure out the next case here, and I will be sure to show you guys that when I am all done with that as well. Hopefully it doesn't take me too long, but we'll see, because sometimes this game makes my brain hurt. Sometimes in a good way, but other times not in a good way. But anyway, see you in the next episode.